All right, how are we doing on time? Am I way over? I was going to say a little bit about this. Let me run through it very quickly. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change exists. It was ratified by 189 countries. It was signed by President Bush Sr. The Kyoto Protocol is a legal instrument under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. This is the thing which is being debated right now in Bali as a part of the Conference of the Parties, number 13, associated with where we go after Kyoto. And there are 176 countries. I just increased this by one because Australia signed it 2 days ago. And the U.S. is the main country that has not ratified the Kyoto Protocol. The idea behind the Kyoto Protocol was to limit greenhouse emissions generally to about a 5% reduction relative to 1990 levels. In 1994, the U.S. was 16% over for greenhouse gases as a whole and 20% over 1990 levels for carbon dioxide. So instead of the U.S. was supposed to be 7% below 1990 levels, and instead, overall, we're at these kinds of levels. The difference between these comes from methane. It turns out methane has actually decreased a little bit. Carbon dioxide is 20% over. So we're 27% over where we're supposed to be. Now, the Congress is debating what to do about this. I've put a heading on this saying, what about a carbon tax? This is actually the easiest way to implement and probably the fairest way to do it, but as soon as you mention taxes, politicians shy away from it because it can be implemented at the places where you mine these and you simply put a tax on carbon and then you can use it for in various ways. Instead, what is going to happen is that there's going to be a cap-and-trade system. The Senate just passed this through a committee yesterday, a cap-and-trade system that suggests that there will be a cap, a limit to the amount of emissions that could go into the atmosphere. You'll be able to have permits as to how much you put into the atmosphere, and then you can trade those, and maybe you can buy these. Some of them will be purchased. Some of them will be given away. How much gets given away and how much gets purchased is where all of the politics comes into this. Politicians love these kinds of things. You should be scared of them in some ways. And what the lobbying of various kinds of vested interests will do in order to distort this. The Europeans already have a thing like this in place, and they've had substantial difficulties with it, mainly because they gave far too many away. And this is designed to establish a cost for burning carbon dioxide, for putting it into the atmosphere. It deals with the effects of carbon dioxide on the environment, on climate change, on air pollution in the atmosphere, which are borne by all of us right now, but not by the people who burn necessarily. This can be equitable if it's implemented across the board, but if some countries, such as the United States, don't participate in this, then it's not equitable and it's not fair, and other countries think that the U.S. is taking advantage of everyone else. And there's a tremendous amount of animosity against the U.S. as a consequence of this kind of thing. The recent trends, what's going on? Coal-fired power stations are one of the biggest problems, and coal-fired power stations have come along. So in China, there's been a new coal-fired power station every 3 days in the last 5 years. There's been 560 new plants. There's an average of about 200 megawatts each. So there's this much extra power now from rather dirty coal-fired power stations. The pollution in a lot of Chinese cities is terrible as a consequence. Now, far from decreasing carbon dioxide emissions in spite of the Kyoto Protocol, the rate of emissions of carbon dioxide have gone up. And carbon dioxide is now being emitted at a faster rate than ever before. By 2030, this is a prediction of the U.S. Energy Information Administration, which is under the Department of Energy overall. This is the projection, is that overall there will be a 59% increase in global emissions relative to 2004 by 2030. So far from being constant or decreasing, this is the projection based upon current rates at which plans are being made to build coal-fired power stations and related things. This shows you the nature of the challenge that we've got, not only to reverse this, but to even hold them constant, let alone decrease them. The bill that's just gone through the Senate says that there has to be a 50% or something like that decrease by 2050, which is a fair way off. They probably think that's why they can get away with it, because they'll all be dead by the time that comes around. Maybe some of you won't be, I don't know. This is what happens if you hold emissions constant at 2,000 values for carbon dioxide. Emissions being constant means that concentrations go up because it has a long lifetime. And so concentrations continue to climb, and temperatures continue to climb, sea level goes up. So even if we held these constant, by, say, 2100, we would be 2.5 degrees warmer than today, degrees Celsius. And that's regarded as being disastrous for many ecosystems. And so, you know, we should act to try and slow down global warming, but we're probably going to have to live with some of it. That's my conclusion, which means we have to adapt to climate change. That means we should plan for climate change. We should plan for the water shortages which are coming. We should plan for the drought, the risk of wildfires that are going to affect Alabama and so on. At the same time, we should try and limit the damage to the extent we can. And there are many things you can do. I've got a bunch of slides like this. I'm only going to show you this one. Use energy-efficient light bulbs. So you can do that. This is my house. This is what it looked like summer before last. This is what it looks like now. And this is the main message. If there's any message that you take away from this, the first one is that you will be affected by climate change. You are already. And secondly, you will be affected by the legislation that gets passed to address climate change. And look out. Some of it may not be good. I don't have confidence that the politicians are going to necessarily do the right thing. I threw this slide in very late. I just got this. This is actually from a series of ads from Diesel, which is a company in Italy. And down in the bottom corner of all of these, it says global warming ready. So here's a company that is showing. Look at these pictures. This is China. Here's the Great Wall of China, all covered in sand. Here's London. This is like a Caribbean Mecca where you go out in a boat. Here's South Dakota. Here's the poor presidents. Here's a guy. He's already global warming ready. He's global warming ready. So is she. Here's New York City. Here's Rio de Janeiro, also underwater, and here's Paris in tropical jungle. So companies are thinking about this and planning for the future. And so this is my last slide. This is the challenge for us, sustainable management of our planet. Thanks. Sorry, I'm glad to take questions. Sorry I ran a bit long. I got too excited about explaining stuff to you, so I hope you'll forgive me. Any questions?
I have a question to lead off. Those models, do they include gas hydrate association?
No. There's a lot of things that those models do not yet include. They don't include the feedbacks from the carbon cycle, changes in permafrost, changes in vegetation, and those could amplify or diminish the overall changes. The class rates that are being referred to here are the methyl hydrates that are in the ocean, so that if the ocean warms up, there's a possibility of destabilizing those and releasing more methane into the atmosphere. This is one of the things that can happen. If the oceans warm up, they can not only not hold as much carbon dioxide, but they can actually give other gases back to the atmosphere and amplify the changes. And the general thought is that these kinds of things, which are not taken into account in our climate models today, would probably lead to even bigger changes than we already are taking into account. So there's a risk that what we're showing here is actually conservative.